So, it's clear that timeline implications after Tears of the Kingdom are not as enthusiastic as many would have thought and hoped. Say what you want about Tears of the Kingdom timeline continuity issues, I definitely have, but my fellow audience, I believe this video will prove the opposite. It might even point to a future Zelda game. While a lot of hardcore Zelda fans are upset about the Light Dragon's transformation not having the consequences it should for a good story, I have something to share today that can bring a light to all of that. Okay, spoiler time. Get the heck out if you're scared of spoilers. I know I am. We all know in the climax of Tears of the Kingdom story that Zelda makes a sacrifice and goes under draconification, becoming the Light Dragon with no end, so that the Master Sword may be empowered and ready to be received by Link in the future. Now check this out. If the Light Dragon existed since the very beginning of Hyrule's founding, that means it roamed the skies during the events of entire Zelda games. Regardless of your timeline opinions or interpretations, it is true that the Light Dragon holding a stronger Master Sword was high above the clouds many years before the events of Breath of the Wild, and even many years before the Great Calamity, which is before that. Now, I'm going to continue with what I've been doing throughout my last few videos, which is treating Age of Calamity with canon significance. If this is alarming, remember how Koei Tecmo, the developer of Age of Calamity, said that the Zelda team was heavily involved with the story. Now let's progress forward. About 100 years before Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the Light Dragon lived in the sky, roaming around above Hyrule. During the Great Calamity, a time-traveling robot created by a young Zelda and presumably her mother was reactivated when Zelda awakened her sealing power to save Link's life from Guardians. This robot, known as Teriko, would then travel back in time to change the outcome of the Great Calamity, creating an alternate timeline. This is what happened in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, but we all know that. But did you know the Light Dragon existed in the sky before the timeline was split from Teriko? The Light Dragon is created because Zelda of the present went back in time and doesn't turn back to normal until the Demon King is defeated in the present day of Tears of the Kingdom. So if the Light Dragon's existence is through a looping timeline requiring time travel to exist, what happens if time goes a different direction while the loop is on its way to a full circle? Can the loop be completed, or did it even exist at all? My friends, let's dive deep into this predicament. Let's use some visual representation because this is a little convoluting. Focusing on the Light Dragon's timeline, there are 4 points of interest: Point A, Point B, Point C, and Point D. Point A is when Zelda travels back in time via Secret Stone at the beginning of Tears of the Kingdom. And Point B is when Zelda turns into a Light Dragon in the distant past so that the Master Sword can grow in power. We need to understand that the event at Point B cannot happen unless the event at Point A is true, which means Zelda must go back in time through the Secret Stone. Point C is when Zelda turns back to normal at the end of Tears of the Kingdom, meaning the Light Dragon's immortality is successfully removed and reverted back to immortal Hylian, which is Zelda. If the event at Point A does not happen, Point B and Point C cannot come true. If Zelda does not go back in time, powering up the Master Sword through millennia of draconification cannot come true. Now everyone, let's look at Point D. The event at Point D is that Teriko splits the timeline, helping the heroes win the Great Calamity immediately. This is done as soon as Teriko arrives in the past, after Age of Calamity's alternate ending. The champions are alive, and the Great Calamity has ended swiftly by the deeds of the heroes about 100 years earlier before this battle was supposed to end. Does Point A still exist in this timeline then? Or rather, is the Light Dragon flying above this new Age of Calamity timeline? Ganondorf is still sealed underneath the castle in Age of Calamity, since he was sealed before that, so Link and Zelda must eventually return down there. Does this mean that Ganondorf will awaken earlier? With Teriko, the champions, and the Yiga becoming good, this confrontation can very well be different. The event at Point A can be prevented. Zelda might not go back in time with the Secret Stone, and if Point A is prevented, the Light Dragon with the stronger Master Sword to defeat Ganondorf cannot exist. Or can it? Point B exists before Point D. However, Point B requires the event at Point A to be successful. But here's the thing, it has. In the original Breath of the Wild timeline, Point D's timeline split happens well after Point B is executed. So if Point B can occur at least once before infinite timeline splits, the event at Point A only needs to occur once, right? Well, my fellow audience, we have a paradox. The Light Dragon's Great Paradox. Now here's the fun part. I could just end the video here and let you guys discuss this immediately in the comments and, let this spread around. But that can't be all. I believe there is more. First of all, I hypothesized and sort of predicted that through this revelation, we would receive a sequel, that of Hyrule Warriors: The Imprisoning War, taking place after Age of Calamity. The reason I assume this game to eventually exist is because I feel like it is on the other side of a bridge, and that bridge is this Light Dragon paradox. Here's a quick side note. If the same Ganondorf exists in another timeline, history has shown with Nintendo's Zelda team that they will utilize that opportunity and finish a story with another game. Hence Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, and then when the timeline was reorganized, A Link to the Past. So what might this story be after the events of Age of Calamity? Well, several things can happen. I'll do the most unique possibility first. It's possible that if it does take a little over 100 years after the events of Age of Calamity for Ganondorf to awaken, then the Link and Zelda of this timeline would grow old, passed on, and/or that would mean reincarnations of them would have to be born and grow to be ready to fight Ganondorf, via Demise's curse and the three goddesses always allowing this to happen. This is assuming the Age of Calamity timeline must parallel the exact dates of the Breath of the Wild timeline in the exact moment that Ganondorf would awaken again. It could even be a bit later than that, too. This means that we could get a different Link and Zelda in the same Hyrule, sorta, as well as slow-aging characters like Mipha the Zora possibly returning, being around Sidon's age this time. While this possibility might sound pretty cool and intriguing, it's probably the most unlikely because Link and Zelda's curiosity would still take them underground shortly after Age of Calamity ends. But some could argue, if the king were to be alive, he might continue to restrict Zelda from going down into the depths. But you could also say, well, would he though? Because Zelda has proven herself as a leader to her people of Hyrule at the end of Age of Calamity. There was also double the malice in Age of Calamity, since some of it followed Teriko from the original Breath of the Wild timeline. So since there was even more malice, could Gloom synthesize and be created earlier, leading to Ganondorf's awakening anyway? It's more likely that Link, Zelda, and all of their allies would discover Ganondorf sooner than later, which leads into the next two possibilities. This second possibility is one of my favorites, and one of my personal visions for an Age of Calamity sequel. This possibility is that the surplus malice here now from the original timeline creates Gloom 100 years quicker, and leads Link and Zelda to a confrontation with Ganondorf earlier without them having to sleep for 100 years. They would also be allied with the good Yiga, the champions, and the king and his royal army, as well as Teriko, the amazing time-traveling robot that can also fight. This could lead the champions Bravali, Urbosa, Mipha, and Daruk to become the sages of the secret stones, because the other sages wouldn't even have been born yet, which could lead to the definite removal of Point A, or rather create a new Point A. Ganondorf will be strong though, and he can fight very well. He might even destroy the Master Sword again and Link's arm. And maybe the king or some of his army might die at the hands of Ganondorf's might. Either way, Rauru would have to heal Link's arm and the Light Dragon could still exist, even if Zelda of that era doesn't go back in time. Because remember, Point A only needs to happen once across infinity for Point B to happen, assuming that's how the paradox could be solved. Which means we could get an ending in which Zelda fights with the secret stone but doesn't turn into a dragon. Then the champions would become sages, and finally Link must receive the powered up Master Sword from the Light Dragon, making the Light Dragon stay as a dragon in the ending. Otherwise, there would be two Zeldas at the same time, the Light Dragon one being the one from the Tears of the Kingdom timeline. Now that's an ending. The final possibility is that a sequel to Age of Calamity that leads to a confrontation with Ganondorf could reach point A by divine fate from the goddesses, regardless of a timeline split or not, something compatible with the lore of the Zelda series. That means that even with Terrako, the champions, the king, and good Yiga, Zelda would still grab the secret stone and go back in time. This becomes a more faithful alternate timeline to Tears of the Kingdom. This would also grant everyone's wishes of playing as Zelda in the memories, ho ho ho, but it doesn't end there. You would also play as Rauru, Sonia, and Minoru in the past. Back in the present, Link would have access to Rauru's arm, as well as his close allies from Age of Calamity. The King and the Champions, as well as armies of Yiga and Hyruleans, would fight alongside Link and aid him in finding Princess Zelda. Terrako would also be in the mix, which could lead to a very interesting story change-up. Using Terrako's time power, they might go back in time to get Zelda instead of Zelda coming to them in the present as the Light Dragon. What's really cool is that I believe, similar to Hyrule Warriors 1, the gang can split up, some of them staying in the present and others going back in time to recover Zelda with Terrako. This game can take place across two time periods simultaneously. To connect multiple of my videos together, I would assume that Link would be sent back in time with Terrako to recover Zelda from the past. Shameless plug, I made a whole video on a what if possibility of Link going back in time with Zelda. Link to that video up here and in the description. I also made a YouTube short of that idea if you ain't got time. Anyway, so Link would aid in the fight in the distant past, while the King and Champions would defend Hyrule against Ganondorf's forces for as long as they could until Link and Zelda returned to the present. Now that's interesting. There might be some crazy story elements like Terrako's time travel getting damaged in the past, so Link and Zelda would have to find a way home even if they beat Ganondorf in the past. This would then multiply the whole idea of separate timelines, as another timeline would be created when Link and Zelda save the past. Or, ladies and gentlemen, check this out. Ganondorf steals Terrako and travels to the future to combine with his past self to ensure victory over the world. Ganondorf would learn of his future and pull a Thanos endgame, like Avengers Endgame, by going into the future and taking over. This would lead to a super crazy ultimate final battle. Maybe Rauru, Sonia, and Minoru might actually follow Link and Zelda to the future to help them. Though from a unique story standpoint, if I were writing this story, I think at least one of them would have to stay in the past. Or maybe Zelda doesn't make it back to the future, but Link does, an emotional turn of events. And then the Age of Calamity Zelda goes under draconification, leading to a true cyclical connection of points A, B, C, and D blending in with the timeline split. Holy cow! What do you guys think about all of this? I mean, this is freaking insane, but you know what? I love it and I want it. I love the Hyrule Warriors games, especially when they're mixed with Nintendo IPs. I need this right now. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I am done, and this trilogy of theory videos is complete. Well, technically it's a quadrilogy if I'm adding in the what if with Link going back in the past. Anyway, this is all to help explain and dissect the Tears of the Kingdom timeline, Age of Calamity's effects on it through Sonia's connection to Zelda's mother who built Terrako and prepared for this outcome. If that sounds crazy to you, I made a whole series of theory videos on Zelda's mother, links all around here and in the description. And recently I put together a set of theory videos all connecting to this point. From the what if Link going back in time with Zelda, to making Terrako's time travel make sense in a triple timeline split, to then explaining how Terrako could even split the timeline through Zelda's influence in Tears of the Kingdom, to now finally explaining the great paradox of the Light Dragon and how it leads to an Age of Calamity sequel, which I believe this sequel to be titled Hyrule Warriors: The Imprisoning War. Links to all of these previous theories just mentioned up here and in the description, as well as in the video's ending card links. Anyway guys, that was a lot, so peace out, God bless. This was Skylink Theory, and thank you all so much for your support. Subscribe for more Zelda content, and I'm out of here.